Oh, hello there, and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. Now, on this show, I've talked about my share of fake bands. That is, bands that didn't form in the normal way of a few kids, playing behind the Dodge, strumming their guitars. Bands that were put together for a TV show, like the Monkees. They became a real band, however. Bands put together for a movie, like Spinal Tap, who became a real band and one of the most hilarious ones of all. Milli Vanilli. The talk about melodrama, they wanted to be real. They were forced to be fake, but they were really dancing. One of them tragically died, but another actually became a real singer. Fab Morvan, definitely follow him on social media. Very inspirational story if there ever was one. Good guy, too. But here's a band that was animated, and this was sort of the golden age of this kind of sort of claymation. It was when people were really starting to get into it. And today, with everything being so advanced and so precise with computer renderings and even AI, I'm not sure if we're ever going to return to an age where claymation is going to be so important. And this fake claymated band were the California Raisins. And it began as a marketing stunt, but it took on a life of its own. The Raisins themselves were created by a state-run organization in California called the California Raisin Advisory Board. And with all that's going on in California right now, and all of it very, painful to see, it makes you just wonder how much simpler things were in the 80s when they could afford to not have deficits as big, but still have a raisin advisory board. Now, I'm not sure if the raisins were giving the advice, getting the advice, or if it was just people giving advice about raisins. It might have been be a bit misleading in that sense. Now, they commissioned Foot, Con, and Belding. They were a big ad agency to come up with something to make raisins more popular. And boy, did they ever. Who would have thought? So the characters behind me were sort of they were like a singing band. They were sort of the typical sort of 1960s style vocal group. And the song that they performed, as one would imagine, is I Heard It Through the Grapevine. And there were, of course, two famous versions of that by real, very real musicians. There was, of course, Marvin Gaye's great version and an equally great version by John Fogerty's Creedence Clearwater Revival. But in the 80s, the version that everyone wanted to hear was the California Raisins, and they were all over TV. They were on billboards, they were on boxes of raisins, they were everywhere. I'm not actually sure if it increased the sale of raisins, but I'd be willing to bet that it did. And they released singles. They released their version of I Heard It Through the Grapevine. Now, it wasn't actually Raisins singing it, it was session musicians, but that's life. It's what all the people say. And it's just a very interesting moment in time because they had a really good run. The various campaigns, and they sung different songs, and they had kid shows for them and merchandise. They lost it all the way to 1994 before the California Raisin Advisory Board was shut down for wasting money. On what? We can only guess. But the fact of the matter is, something that was just supposed to increase the sales of a dried fruit ended up becoming quite a cultural phenomenon. And if you weren't there, then you probably find this all a bit weird. But go on YouTube and look at these original commercials. They were a lot of fun. And I think one of the reasons is that they didn't try to emulate a famous song. They didn't parody a song. It was just a straight up rendering of session musicians singing while cartoon claymated characters mimed along to a very well-known and very beloved song to both R&B and rock audiences alike. Maybe that's a formula for success that we should use now that apparently advertising is going through a few changes that I'm not allowed to talk about for fear of censorship. Anyway, as always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.